Welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Police Baton, a very early game weapon that is a little bit underwhelming. So the Police Baton is something that you can get likely from powder gangers very early on. You can buy this from a couple vendors. You can potentially find this on various raiders. It's not really a standard weapon to be finding, especially into the mid and late game for basically any part of the game. Maybe you can find a couple in the Sierra Madre, which kind of makes sense because the security would have them. But yeah, the Police Baton is in kind of an awkward spot. The Police Baton requires 0 melee and 1 strength to wield, meaning that any character at any level can use this effectively, which is kind of cool. You would kind of expect that for a weapon like this since you can get it so early on. This does 10 damage per hit, which is fairly low for a melee weapon. Has 28 damage per second, which is also fairly low, but okay. It has a decent attack speed overall. This has 10 crit damage to it, which is fine, same as its regular damage. It's not very high, but it's the same, so that's kind of nice. Has a 1x crit modifier, so normal crits. Costs 23 action points, which is okay. That's kind of low, but there's other melee weapons that are lower than this that you can get earlier on, so it makes it really awkward in that regard too. This one weighs 2 weight, meaning that Pack Rat could cut it in half to 1 weight, and it's not super heavy to be carrying these around. This has a lot of item HP though. This has 250 item HP, so it doesn't break very quick, which you would kind of expect from something like this. A blunt weapon shouldn't break super fast, although the lead pipes do. I think the lead pipes would be a better option than this though, because they have higher damage. But yeah, 250 item health is pretty good. Makes it so if you are going to use this, you don't have to repair it. And then this, just like every melee weapon, has its own unique VATS attack. This one is Lights Out. We've talked about this before, where this is just the big overhead swing that you get with it. It does a little bit more damage for costing a little bit more action points. It's nothing way crazy for the Police Baton, but it is something, so that's kind of nice. Melee weapons are generally pretty decent in VATS, so that is a pro to this. For the pros of this weapon, it does have good item HP. That's really cool. It's not going to break very fast, and it is an early game weapon. So if you want to use this, that's perfectly fine. There's not a whole lot of other early game melee weapons to start out with, unless you want to rush Chance's knife, but then that kind of destroys like 90% of the melee weapons anyway. So like this is a decent option. You could argue that this being better or worse than like the straight razor or the knife. You could argue it being better or worse than some of the other weapons, maybe even the lead pipe early on, because even though you might get those early on and they do better damage, they do break a bit quicker. So the Police Baton still kind of has a use there in the very early game. The cons of this, though, is that it does low damage, it does low damage per second, and it falls off really hard later on. There's no real reason for you to be using a Police Baton later on into the game unless you're specifically doing a challenge run or you're doing a character-specific run. Like you're trying to be security or trying to be a cop or something in the Wasteland, in which case then, yeah, the Police Baton still kind of works for that, but if you're just wanting to kill stuff quickly, there's a lot more better one-handed melee weapons and two-handed melee weapons as the game goes on. There are plenty of perks that help out with this too, the standard melee perks that help out with everything. Slayer is really good because you get more attack speed, so that's really nice. Purifier is good if you want to kill any sort of mutated creatures, Deathclaws and stuff like that. I don't think you should be fighting them with the Police Baton, but you could, because melee can bully just about anything. Piercing Strike is good because you can punch through armor with it, so that's kind of nice. And then you also have Super Slam that can knock down enemies, and that allows you to 1v1 a lot of enemies with basically anything in melee. And these are all the perks that are really going to carry something like the Police Baton. The Police Baton doesn't really have much to add to these, and again, other melee one-handed weapons or two-handed weapons are going to be much better than this. So for an overall rating of my tier list, I would have to put the Police Baton into the F tier. It's not completely useless. It's not as bad as like the rolling pin that we also looked at not too long ago. This does have better stats than something like that, just across the board. The Police Baton is just one of those weapons where it doesn't really fill much of a niche. It kind of does in the very early game, so I could see people arguing this to D tier, because at least it has high item HP, and there's not a whole lot of other melee weapons early on that kind of have that. But then again, you could get like the shovel early on, or again, you could get Chance's knife early on if you want to go that route. You could get Brass Knuckles, which is all kind of going to be better than the Police Baton in particular. So I feel like that's where it kind of belongs. It's just kind of a weapon that doesn't really fill much of any sort of niche at any point in the game, unless again you're doing a character-specific run. So tell me your thoughts on the Police Baton down in the comments below. How do you enjoy using it? Do you enjoy using it? And thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.